Hello, everyone, and welcome into this episode of the Bear Down Buzz podcast. As always, myself, Eli, joined by Joe and Isaac. Fellas, a 20-19 heartbreaking loss. This is becoming a trend for our beloved Chicago Bears. 11 straight losses to Green Bay in what, in the final seconds, seemed like a surefire win to finally break the streak and get this Caleb Williams era against the Packers started off the right way. But a blocked field goal made that a loss, and that's what we're going to talk about first, right here off the bat. Isaac, I'll start with you. There was a lot of conversation around Matt Eberflus's decision to not run a play before kicking the field goal to maybe get Cairo Santos more of an opportunity to make this field goal. It ended up being a 46-yard blocked field goal attempt. Your thoughts kind of on whether or not, if you were in that position, would you have ran a play, uh, whether it be a run, a pass, to kind of give Cairo maybe an extra boost there to make that field goal?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely would have ran another play. And I saw the statistic that ESPN brought up. Carlos Santos from under 40 yards is 70 for 70. That's 100%. Now, him kicking it from 45 or higher, it drops all the way down to 76%. That's a 24% difference, right? And the fumble loss percentage in the NFL this season is 0.46%. So why are you scared of fumbling the ball? It doesn't make sense, right? We have 35 seconds left in the game. I'm pretty sure at some point this season, the Bears looked at this statistic and was like, okay, guys, like I think if we're in this situation, we gotta go for it, you know? We can't just be content with kicking a 46-yard field goal. And even the Packers players were talking about it after the game where they were like, oh, we were watching film and we noticed that Cairo kicks it kind of most NFL kickers, they kick it up and over, and Cairo's kind of just like straight up. Like it's easier for teams to block his field goals if you understand what I'm saying. But yeah, I mean, I would have definitely gone for it. Like I don't understand just kind of essentially giving up. And that's what a lot of the major NFL analysts were talking about today, where they were basically just saying, you know what? The Bears, they kind of just looked like they didn't want to win. Like I don't know, like at that play, like you just don't go for it. I don't get it. And the thing to me that's crazy is Caleb Williams, the three best throws that he had against the Packers were all in that drive. It was the 30-19 to Roma Dunze, the 4th and 3 to Dunze again, and then the Keenan Allen pass. So he has the hot hand. Why don't you just throw it, you know? Just give him another chance. Like trust in your number one overall pick. And it brings me back to that point earlier in the game where Caleb was yelling at Eberflus to go for it on 4th down. I absolutely loved it, by the way, because Eberflus was probably not going to go for it unless Caleb was yelling at him. He was probably telling him, like, what the hell are you doing, dude? Like, just let's go for it. Like, it doesn't make sense to punt or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, it's every week, it's bad decisions by Matt Eberflus. And it it's crazy that Bears ownership just is reluctant on not firing him. Like, let's give Thomas Brown the interim head coach the rest of the season, see how that works out. I'm pretty sure if Eberflus was fired last week, that we would have won this game against the Packers. We put ourselves in situations that we shouldn't be in the first place. And I saw this thing that was brought up on Twitter that if the Bears won against the Commanders, and if they won against the Packers, they would have been 6-4, would have been the sixth seed in the NFC playoff picture. So, I mean, we're 4-6, is not looking good. Like the rest of the season, it's gonna be tough. But yeah, I mean, I would have definitely gone for it on that play and give would have tried to at least give Cairo a better opportunity. So I'll pass it over to you, Joe, and your thoughts on this.
So I want to start what I Isaac was talking about with Cairo's kicks, their low trajectory. So it's easier. So with what Isaac was saying, the Packers players knew it was easier to block them. Uh, and that special teams coach had been saying all week that they're going to block at least one kick today. Well, I guess yesterday or Sunday. So yeah, that was what Isaac was talking about. But in terms of not running a play for the field goal, I understand where Eberflus is coming from. The Bears are known to mess stuff up. If you watch any Bears game, you know that they have a ton of penalties. Um, or we're just snake bitten, and we'll. I believe that we might have fumbled, but I can't play scared. When you're a coach, you have to be aggressive. You have to set your team up to win. Jim Harbaugh did that yesterday night or Sunday night on Sunday Night Football against Bengals. He ran a play. It was a running play in the final 30 seconds of the game. J.K. Dobbins ended up getting a touchdown, and the Chargers beat the Bengals 34-27. So yeah, if I do, I can see where Flip is coming from. Disagree with what he did. I think he should have ran at least one more play. Um, but the, the thing with that too, I guess, is you don't really know how many yards you're gonna get, obviously. So like, sure, you can say you run a play. If you only get 2 or 3 yards, it doesn't really change the kick. You'd have to get at least 5 to 10 more yards probably to change the kick significantly. So that's another thing you have to take into account. But I do think we should have at least ran one more play, and maybe don't have it be a well. I don't know. Maybe have it be a pass, and if no one's there quickly, have Caleb get rid of it. I guess you could have ran it again, but I would have liked to see a pass probably, because like Isaac said, Caleb had the hot hand on that drive. So yeah, Flus's decision, I see where he's coming from, but I don't agree with it. How about you, Eli?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, just the conversation around it in general. During that broadcast, you even heard Kevin Burkhardt, as the clock was winding down, he said, "What are they doing? Like, you've got to go. Like, do something." Like, and we just ran off about 20 to 25 seconds off the clock, and it didn't even seem like it seemed like Eberflus had his mind made up even before they sent the field goal unit. Like he just mailed it in and said, "We're going to kick this field goal from where it is." It didn't seem like they gave it any consideration. And I wonder how, Thomas Brown kind of reacted to that, because as we've kind of all saw, he called a great offensive game plan for on a short week, coming in as a new offensive coordinator. He called a great game the entire day. And I want to know his kind of thoughts on that whole process. So maybe throughout the week we'll get more. Maybe he'll be available to media, and they can kind of ask him about that. But I haven't heard any of his reaction. But yeah, me personally, yeah, I would have obviously ran another play, even regardless, of the risk, so to speak. If you lose a yard or two and you get stuffed at the line of scrimmage, I would even feel better for you trusting in your personnel to maybe get extra yards, rather than just mailing it in that you don't trust your guys enough to gain yardage to make it easier for Cairo to kick that ball. Uh, and you kind of mentioned it, Isaac, I believe, that the Packers players knew better than our own personnel uh, what his kicking style is, and uh, it was just such a mess, that whole ordeal. But personally, yeah, I would have ran an extra play regardless of what happened. Worst case scenario, we fumble, the Packers recover, and the game's over. But I just think, as you kind of mentioned, Isaac, that's such a low percentage thing to happen this season. Um, but overall, yeah, I would have ran a play. Now, let me ask you this, because it's been another topic of conversation uh, in the days following this game. Do you personally believe, and Joe, I will start with you. Uh, Matt Eberflus announced during one of his pressers that he is going to send in the actual field goal attempt itself for a potential flag in that scenario for the Packers' interior rush there, whether it be to see if there was an extra push there, which is also illegal, or if there was leveraging that Gervon Dexter was called for in 2 games prior in that Arizona Cardinals game. So, Joe, I'll start with you. Do you believe there were any penalties to be called on that final field goal attempt?
So I watched something, uh, of a breakdown of the field goal, and it sounds like that they weren't uh doing anything illegal. I mean, so the rule is you cannot push the long snapper down, because it's meant to keep him healthy and safe, because the long snapper obviously has their head down, right when the play starts because he's snapping the ball. So you're not allowed to push him down even further and leverage off of him. But if you watch the film or look at still frames of the person who blocked it, I forget his name right now, but he actually just got through the A gap and got his one of his fingers or a couple of his fingers on the ball, and just enough to tip it. Um, it's not like he swatted it down or anything, and it's not like he leveraged. Like if I guess if you're watching the play live, it looks like he leveraged himself over. I didn't think it when I was watching it live, but a lot of people did. I disagree. I don't think it was a penalty. Um, but like even if it was, I don't understand why you were supposed to gonna send it in because nothing can happen after the game. Like this is not just a thing in uh football. Like basketball basketball teams do this all the time. Seems like they send plays in after the game all the time. I think they'll fine a player or like that's probably what'll happen if anything does come out of it is they'll fine whoever they think leveraged. I don't think anyone leveraged, but like I really just don't understand the reasoning for sending it into the league. Like again, we can if you want to blame the refs, you can, but it's really not the refs' fault. You can't rely on a penalty to bail you out of a block kick. You have to, like you guys are both saying, uh, you have to know your own personnel and you have to know that that's a weakness that you can get through and stop it from getting through, or like we just talked about, get closer, and that won't happen most likely. Or the third thing, Matt Pryor needs to actually block his guy. I know they overloaded us, but Matt Pryor didn't have a good enough block. You got to block him. If you block him, it doesn't happen. So yeah, I think it's like I don't know. I don't get why you would send the play-ins. How about you, Isaac?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Joe. Like, if it's a foul or if it's a penalty, then it is what it is. But you can't really let that be the case of like why you should win or why you shouldn't win. And I think that penalty was a bigger testament to the Bears offensive line and just how bad of a job Ryan Poles has constructed this offensive line because I've been extremely critical that I believe offensive line is one of the most important factors on offense besides the quarterback. And you could see this in Detroit. Like Detroit has the best offensive line and they're just mauling people, like putting up more than 50 points a game on multiple opponents and stuff like that. So when I look at the Bears play and I just see how little time Caleb Williams has, and I see guys constantly on the ground, like specifically Matt Pryor, I've noticed that he's been on the ground a lot in recent games. It's really frustrating. And I was talking to my dad about this when I was watching the Sunday night game. It's a big deal. Like having a good offensive line is a big deal. If you watch the Chargers play, they have a really good offensive line. Like Justin Herbert finally has time to do what he's good at and is throwing the ball. And we noticed that. And then on the other side, where the Bengals have such a good quarterback in Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and they have the league's leading receiving yards and passing yards and sack leader and all that stuff. But without a good offensive line, you're not going to do anything. And the Bengals, they had a nice comeback there against the Chargers, but at the end, they just couldn't get it done because they don't have a good offensive line. And that's what the Bears need to really focus on in this year's draft. And that's what I'm going to be preaching for in my articles and in this podcast. Like, I better see more than half of our draft picks, more than half of our cap space go to offensive line because I'm sick and tired of seeing guys that can't block, and it just leads to stuff like that. Like that blocked field goal, that shouldn't have happened in the first place. The guy should have just had, been better at blocking the Packers players, and unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The Packers did their homework. The Bears just I mean, yes, like we could blame Eberflus and coaching all we want, but it is partly on the players as well. And the offensive line just couldn't get it done. So I'll pass it back to you, Eli, and your thoughts on this, situation.
Yeah, so I completely agree with both of you. Mainly the point that um we cannot let ourselves get into these situations where a game can be dictated by a call by an official. Because again, and we've repeated it multiple times this year, Matt Eberflus is not the guy that you can kind of count on in these one score games. I'll have to find the official statistic in the official record of Matt Eberflus, but I believe he is 5-17. You can feel free to correct me on that when it comes to those one score games. So that is the absolute bottom of the league. That's the worst record of any NFL head coach in the league right now. So that just goes to show you, if we want to win games, we have to be the ones to win them, and we cannot rely on the officials to do their correct job, regardless of whether or not you thought it was a penalty or not. Kind of going back to the original discussion, if, you know, and Joe, to kind of agree with you, it doesn't matter what we hear back from the league, because nothing is going to change the fact that we lost that game. Like, you can find Carl Brooks all you want. That doesn't change the fact that the Bears are 4-6 rather than getting back to 500. It just, again, you get into these one score games more times often than not. If you're a Bears fan, we are not going to win that game. And that just, not to get back into the whole Matt Eberflus conversation, but at this point, I think we can all kind of establish that we all believe he is gone at the end of the year, and that should be it should be 99% of people agree that he should be gone at the end of the year, and the 1% just must not have watched a Bears game the past 3 years. That's all you can really think about it. Another aspect of this that we won't really get into, but I do want to mention, is the fact that we did go for 2 earlier in the game, as did Green Bay, I believe, and we did not get that. So that turned out to rather it being a 21-14 game, it was a 19-14 game, and obviously Green Bay scored, and we missed the field goal, losing by 1 point. So that's another aspect of this. Joe and I kind of talked about that beforehand. We both agreed that it was the right call in that situation, and maybe things would be different if we did convert there, but that just didn't happen. So that's the end result of this game. But overall, we've kind of talked about the negatives from this game, and we're 4-6 and we have to move on. But the offense this week did look a lot better, especially against a defense that the offense usually doesn't look good against. So that's a positive moving forward. But Joe, I will ask you first, what were some of your major takeaways, mainly for the offense, that you thought looked improved under Thomas Brown this week?
So, I'll go. The things that I really saw were Caleb was getting the ball out really quickly, which he was doing during his good stretch, and then the past 3 weeks he hasn't been doing. So Thomas Brown gave him a lot of quick answers. They got the ball to Cole Kmet 3 times, which was nice to see. He had a really nice deep ball, and then 2 underneath passes that he took out field for like 5 to 10 yard gains, which, yeah, give him the ball. He will do that. Waldron apparently didn't like him or something because he didn't want to give him the ball at all. And then the DeAndre Swift, he had 1 big run. Other than that, he really wasn't doing much on the ground. But that 40-yard run was the reason that we were even in the game. But I really like the fact that they gave the ball to Roshan. They gave him the ball 10 times. He ran it for 33 yards. Yeah, that's only 3.3 yards per carry. But 2 runs, you saw him power through people and get 2 or 3 more yards that he probably shouldn't have gotten. Swift definitely wouldn't have gotten. Because Swift can break tackles, but he's not gonna run through people. He run through his tackles when they're like arm tackles, not like people. So that's what Roshan gives you, and that's why he was a goal line power back. But I said this in an article I wrote after the game. I don't, and I said this exact thing, but I said something this ilk. I don't understand why Waldron was able to identify the fact that he's a good goal line back, then not use him more outside the goal line, power through people, and have that duo between him and him and Swift, because Roshan could you know, uh, weigh down the defense, and then Swift can go and break off those runs like we saw him get break off. I mean, again, that rush wasn't really an effect of Roshan. It was more Jackson Jones demolished somebody, and then uh, Swift juked out Xavier McKinney, which was nice to see after the crap he was talking this week. Um, and then he was pissed. If you watch the film, you can see how pissed McKinney was afterwards. Um, but yeah, I so I'm happy that they gave Roshan the ball more. And then Rome Dunze really he didn't have like the best game of his young career, but he broke out. Like that final drive, he was the reason that we were even in field goal position because him and Caleb found a connection. And apparently, in the conference afterwards, Caleb said that Rome is his guy. So like that's nice to hear and nice to see. Uh, and yeah, DJ Miller might be a little bit upset about that, but he still got the ball yesterday, which again was a good thing. And all our playmakers actually made plays and not didn't drop balls or didn't look like they were giving no effort. So I'm really happy about that on offense. Uh, yeah, we need to see this more going forward. I don't know if we're gonna see as good of an offense as we did this week against the Vikings, just because the adrenaline's high after firing your OC. You want to prove that this guy is like we want to play to this guy because you guys didn't like the old OC. Now, I'm not saying they don't want to play for this guy anymore, obviously, but that adrenaline's going to be gone after playing one game. So, like, we can hope it's going to be good. It'll still be better, but it might not be as good as it was in week one. Uh, and then moving forward after this week, maybe it continues to improve. Like, I don't think it flatlines this week, but I don't think it takes another massive bump this week. It probably either stays the same or gets a little worse. And then after this week, it probably goes, uh, probably it's another bump and then stays pretty much the same. But who knows? We could all be wrong. He could, uh, we could see an explosion of offense somehow against the Vikings and then throughout the rest of the season. But yeah, I love the way the offense looked.
Yeah, and then I basically agree with everything that Joe was saying. I'm really curious as to what the Bears were doing during practice before throughout the season with Waldron because this team just looks like a completely different team on offense. And then to add what Joe was kind of talking about with Caleb Williams, according to NFL's Next Gen stats, Williams averaged a league best 1.92 seconds time to throw in the first half against Green Bay, which is really, I think it was a second faster than what he's been usually throwing at, which is crazy. And the Bears also had a season high of 51.7% of plays featuring pre-snap motion, which I think it really helps Caleb Williams play to the best of his abilities, which is like getting out of the pocket, moving. We noticed that he had 70 rushing yards. He was able to just be more decisive with his legs and his arm that he wasn't previously with Shane Waldron. And I thought it was funny how on that touchdown, goal line touchdown with Roshan Johnson, the Bears put in Doug Kramer. I'm pretty sure that got a lot of Bears fans really nervous. They're like, oh no, are they gonna do this again? I don't know if that was Thomas Brown kind of showing Bears fans like listen, like I'm not gonna be Shane Waldron. I'm gonna be Thomas Brown. Like I'm gonna be legit. Like you guys don't have to worry about me playing calling anything stupid. Like handing it off to a backup center that's never had a carry in the NFL. But besides that, like what Joe was mentioning, I really liked how we actually used DJ Moore in more of that like gadget kind of role that he should have been uh more in this season instead of like there was a couple screens which it's kind of annoying as Bears fans to see a lot of screens again, but it was nice to see that DJ Moore was the one getting the ball instead of blocking, and it wasn't like Keenan Allen, who's older and he shouldn't really be the focal point of a screen, anyways. But I also really liked how Adunze was getting more targets. He looked like a legit number one wide receiver. And even, when DJ Moore gets a little older, Keenan Allen's probably not going to be on this team after. Rome's going to have a big role in this offense. And it's nice that Caleb was saying that Rome is his guy, like Joe was mentioning earlier. And then just there's so many things that you could take out from the game on offense for the Bears. Like the fact that the Bears used Roshan a little bit more to give Swift just some time to, get his breath and then be more explosive when he's on the field. And then also for Roshan, he's a really good running back. I don't know why Waldron was scared of using him. He'll probably use him like once in the beginning of the game and then just kind of like fade away unless it was a goal line situation. But even then, he didn't even use him. But besides that, like the offensive line looked a lot better. It was really nice to have Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright back because they were injured previously. They didn't play last week against the Patriots. Darnell Wright looked really good. Again, he was a top 10 pick uh, 2 seasons ago, I believe, and I have really high hopes for him, and I hope that he continues to grow. And he was kind of regressing in the beginning of the season, and it was a little worried. We were all a little worried about it. We were talking about it in the previous episode, but it's nice to see that he's back on the right track. And as for Braxton Jones, I'm kind of on the fence about if we need to upgrade at left tackle this offseason because left tackle is the most important position. And like Braxton Jones did have a really nice block on that Swift touchdown. Everyone saw it, but I don't know if he's consistent enough. And I would say maybe elite where you can't really replace him. I think he is replaceable. And if it's Ryan Poles, that's, the GM, or if we fire him and hire someone else, they really need to make a decision because having a really good left tackle is huge for this team. And I understand that we drafted Amagaji in the third round and he's a left tackle, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. But I'll toss it over to you, Eli, and your thoughts on this Bears offense.
Yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head. And I think the overarching theme is, you know, Joe, you mentioned Caleb being able to get the ball to all of his playmakers. And Isaac, you kind of mentioned the personnel usage. And that's the whole point, is that Thomas Brown did what Shane Waldron couldn't and didn't understand. And he knows how to play to the strengths of his personnel. And I think that was super impressive. He's been on the team all season and he was the passing game coordinator. So he already had a bit of an idea. But for him to come in 1 week and understand what Shane Waldron was not able to understand through 10 weeks was the fact that he knows what the players on this squad are good at. He used DJ Moore's yards after catch ability. He got Cole Kmet involved in the offense on big plays to kind of give Caleb Williams a safety net. And he understood that Roschon Johnson is the short yardage back. And he didn't do anything special with Roschon Johnson. He just knows that, hey, if I need a few yards, Roschon's the guy to do it. I don't need to bring in Doug Kramer. I don't need to use DeAndre Swift when he's, better outside of the tackles. He understood what Shane Waldron took 10 weeks to not understand, I guess is the way to put it. And the offense looked arguably better than it did all season, aside from, maybe the London game where Caleb was firing on all cylinders. But I thought it was super impressive just what he was able to do in 1 week. And it makes you think maybe if, Thomas Brown isn't retained in the offseason, maybe future offensive coordinators or play callers need to be up in the booth, regardless of, if we were to hire Ben Johnson as the next head coach, he's probably not going to be up in the booth calling plays, but for future offensive coordinators, maybe that's something we really need to consider. Maybe the booth gives teams an advantage where being on the sidelines doesn't. And, maybe that's just a Shane Waldron thing and he's a bad offensive coordinator. There's the conversation to be had there too. But yeah, Thomas Brown knows how to use his personnel. And I think that's the main thing that gives us hope moving forward. Isaac, you also kind of mentioned the offensive line improved. I completely agree with you. It looked much better. And that's largely due to the part of Caleb getting the ball out quicker. And again, that goes back to Thomas Brown realizing that this offensive line has underperformed this season. So what better to do than to use Caleb's ability with his legs, get him on the move. Caleb can play from the pocket. We've seen it and he knows how to do that. But it almost seems like he's better on the move in those off-platform throws. You saw it in the Chiefs game yesterday in that Chiefs versus Buffalo game. Mahomes does it every week where he rolls out to his right, goes straight to the sideline, fires back inside, across his body and makes those off-platform throws. That's something Caleb's really good at too. So again, I feel like I'm overstating it, but for Thomas Brown to recognize this in 1 week when he was thrown into the position, I just thought it was super impressive. So it gives us hope moving forward. And Joe, you kind of mentioned that this Vikings defense might not make the Bears offense look like it did this week, and we might have more of a struggle going up against Brian Flores in that defense because they give a lot of creative looks. But at the very least, I don't think it can get to rock bottom where it had been under Shane Waldron. So offensively, that's what I've got to say. Now we can go to the flip side on this. Defensively, Isaac, I'll start with you. It didn't seem like the Bears played bad defensively. We could not get a lot of pressure against Jordan Love, and that's arguably when he's at his worst. Uh, Maybe there needs to start being a conversation about Montez Sweat and this defensive line. But I want to get your thoughts defensively. What did you think of the performance from the Bears yesterday against Green Bay, and what, if anything, needs to change moving forward?
I think they had a decent performance, but I found myself like getting pissed off several times during the game because they were like so close to sacking him, and I felt like every time Jordan Love would escape out of the pocket, and either if he just ran out of bounds or he threw an incompletion or a pass, whatever it is, like the Bears offensive line is really a point of concern. And like you mentioned, Eli, I think Montez Sweat just doesn't look like the same player that he was last season. And it sucks because we just gave him a massive contract, but hopefully it's just an injury thing or a mental thing and he could bounce back. But I don't know, like not having Andrew Billings in the defensive tackle position is a huge loss for this team. And I feel like Zach Pickens, the guy who's replacing him, who was a third round pick not too long ago, hasn't really done anything to prove that he was deserving of getting drafted so high up. Um, and I don't know. I don't know if it's Eberflus that is calling the rotations, but the rotations are a little questionable to me because we have players that should be getting more playing time, like Austin Booker. He's not really on the field a lot. Um, and at the same time, it's like if we don't have a pass rush, like it's gonna be tough for everyone else. And I think I give a lot of credit to the secondary and the linebackers because they played a really good game. Terrell Smith had that nice interception on Love when they were in the red zone, but it's the defensive line that's really concerning to me. And I don't know, like I've never seen a team, especially the Bears, where they are really lacking on both sides of the ball and when it concerns to trenches. Like if you don't have good players in the trenches, you're not going to win a lot of games. And we're seeing that with this Bears team. So there's not a lot that the Bears team can do the rest of the season. It's just gonna be like, can these guys, perform and prove us wrong? But yeah, I'm really concerned. I don't know if Montez Sweat is dealing with. I'm pretty sure it's an injury related thing, and sometimes players just have a down year, and hopefully this down year ends this year and it doesn't carry on to next year for him. But defensive line, sorry, it's gonna be a thing that we should address either free agency, draft, or both. But I think the Bears played a decent game. We didn't hold them. We did hold them under 21 points, which is nice. I thought it was gonna be a bigger blowout. I thought the Packers were gonna come in here and win 30-10. I think that's what I said in the last episode. But um, it just sucks. Like the Bears always give us a little bit of hope and optimism, and then they just crush it. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts on the defense. I'll toss it over to you, Joe, and your thoughts on this Bears defense.
All right. So knowing you guys, I think this is a bit of a hot take, but I don't think our defense played great at all yesterday. We only, like you said, we only got one sack on Jordan Love. And we also, besides the end of half drive in the first half, which was 7 seconds and they need it, we uh, only had only made them punt one time. Now we did get two goal line stops. One was an interception, but with a really bad high overthrow from Jordan Love, and the other one we stopped them like inside the 10. So that's good. but you really need to see them, especially against the Packers, get more than one punt. Like, that's unacceptable. Packers were able to move the ball up and down the field all day. That can't happen. Um, and yeah, Jalen Johnson on the final drive that the Packers scored on, he was the one that got burned by Christian Watson for the 60-yard gain. I think he tripped over his own feet and fell down on the ground, and then he took him a little bit to get back up, and like he was laying there, and he took him like 2 or 3 seconds to get back up. When it probably shouldn't have taken him that long. If he got back up quicker, that 60-yard game might not have happened. Now everyone does have a bad play now and then, but I just that's from your number one cornerback. You don't want to see that ever. So I don't think the defense played that great last year, especially with not getting anything but one sack. I mean, like you said, Montez Sweat hasn't been playing well, uh, really this season as well as he did last season at least. He's has been hurt. But going back to what you said earlier about trenches and drafting offensive linemen, uh, and this whole Braxton Jones conversation that you had, I don't think you can replace Braxton Jones, uh, because at least this season, because you don't need to just focus the line or the draft on drafting offensive linemen. You need to draft some defensive linemen too. I know we drafted Dexter uh and Pickens 2 years ago. Dexter has kind of fallen off a cliff after the first half of the season. Well, I don't know if you want to say falling off the cliff. I think he was playing out of his mind the first like 4 weeks, and then he's come back down to reality of what he really is as of now. I don't think he's not gonna get to somewhere that's like extremely good, but it's still probably gonna take him a little bit of time to do that. And then Pickens, yeah, he hasn't been playing great. He was hurt most of this year, and then when he came back and replaced Billings, he hasn't really been playing that good. Uh, they need to definitely draft at least another edge rusher. I know we did Austin Booker last year. You could still work on rotations next year, but if you can get another elite pass rusher somehow in the draft, then and pair him with Montez Sweat, that'll be great. And then obviously when going back to the offensive line thing, draft some interior offensive linemen because we need that. But yeah, definitely draft a defensive lineman because this defensive line, although it looked good in early in the season, we were going up against really bad teams. So yeah, they were bound to look good. Now against some real competition and our first real opponent, I guess last week too, they didn't look great against a bad offensive line. That we need some people who could actually rush the passer and get to the quarterback. But yeah, basically the defense. I just don't think the defense played that well yesterday. How about you, Eli?
Yeah, the whole Montez Sweat conversation, I think historically throughout his career, I think he has been a good pass rusher. I don't think he is in the elite conversation. I don't think he's not a TJ Watt. He's not a Nick Bosa type. I think he's in that tier two to like 2A, 2B kind of conversation. I think he is one of those players that if you have another guy that gets a lot of pressure and takes away some attention from Montez Sweat, he can be an all pro. But he can't do it by himself. I love the type of player that Montez Sweat is, and I'm glad that we gave up the capital and signed him to the contract. Uh, but he does need help on that other side. And right now we're just mixing in a rotation of guys like Daryl Taylor and whoever you want to throw in there. The names escape me at the moment, but uh, there's just not a reliable second option right now. We're just trying to find a lot of ways to get pressure. Now, I do think it's a lot better than it was last year, at least pressure wise. But uh, that's got to be addressed this offseason, as you guys kind of mentioned. Whether it's a guy you sign in free agency or someone that you draft, I think this upcoming draft class has a load of talent when it comes to edge rushers and defensive linemen. Uh, and as for the offensive line, there's plenty of talent to be had in free agency, I believe. Several guys where their contracts are expiring, and then obviously the draft. There's always talented offensive linemen in the draft, but it just seems like the Bears are never the team to find those talented offensive linemen, at least in the last few years. And historically speaking, it just hasn't happened for Chicago. But if they want any chance for Caleb to develop into the guy that we've seen several flashes from, and you saw it on Sunday, they've got to address that, and they've got to address the defensive line to just make this team overall more competitive moving forward against our divisional opponents. Because we talked about it earlier, Joe. This, to me, this was the game to where, you know, the Bears could have righted the ship, got back to 500, and shown that we have a quarterback that can beat division rivals. And in my opinion, I think he did. I think he showed he threw all over that Green Bay defense, and he made smart decisions, and he used his athletic ability. I think personally, he, and this is a weird thing to say because they lost the game and you don't want to be like that, but I think he did everything the right way to beat Green Bay. So I don't chalk it up as a loss personally for Caleb Williams. He played excellent. It's a team sport and they lost that game, but Caleb showed that he can play against Green Bay where other Bears quarterbacks couldn't. So that's promising moving forward. But again, to repeat my point, they've just got to invest this offseason in the trenches to make this a more competitive football team, because that's where it all starts. And that's cliche to say too, but that's where it starts. Isaac, did you have something?
I wanted to ask you, Eli. So we heard my opinion on Braxton Jones, and we heard Joe's opinion on Braxton Jones. So I want to ask you, what's your opinion on Braxton Jones? And then a second question is, the Bears are probably going to pick around the 15th spot in the first round. So let's say we get to that spot and there's a premier offensive tackle like Kelvin Banks or Will Campbell that's available. Would you be willing to draft one of those tackles, or is it kind of just you're kind of just set on, you know what, let's address other positions and then move forward from there?
Yeah, so I personally think that Braxton Jones is a good left tackle to get you through a few seasons until you can upgrade. And I think if you're in a situation where Braxton Jones, of all people, is your swing tackle and he can come in and play if one of your tackles goes down, I think to me that is his ceiling. I think he's been a good starter for the Bears for a few years, to where we just haven't been able to upgrade, or we just refuse to pay money in free agency to sign a premier left tackle because they are expensive. Uh, so I don't really fault the Bears for not wanting to pay that price tag. To me, I think if like you mentioned, if you're in that 15 range, that's usually that 10 to 15 range is where a lot of tackles go. So to me, if there's no defensive lineman on the board to where you're like, that guy can be a game wrecker and he is right away plug and play our starter on the defensive line, then yeah, I think you totally upgrade at left tackle there. Depending on what their evaluation is, if you got one of those premier prospects like you mentioned, I think you pull the trigger and you go for it. Uh, I love Braxton Jones, but I think we've seen it in his career. When it comes to the bull rush, teams key in on that in their film process, and I think that's just been his weakness. Uh, Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he is a much better run blocker than he is a pass blocker. Uh, he just doesn't have that anchor. He doesn't have that base to be a premier left tackle. But I think for what the position the Bears have been in, I think he's been a solid answer at left tackle. But that is the position on the offensive line to where you protect the quarterback's blind side, and you have to be that stalwart guy to protect your quarterback. And we've seen more times often than not Braxton Jones get pushed into the backfield and just bullied. And we've seen Caleb Williams take those hits from his blind side. And that's the guy. I think we've found our quarterback. And if you get an opportunity to upgrade like that, I think you go for it right away. And then, yeah, I think I answered both of your questions there regarding Braxton Jones and whether you want to upgrade in the draft and everything like that. But with that being said, you guys have anything else you want to talk about regarding this Packers matchup, or, addressing things in the offseason? I think everyone's mindset regarding Matt Eberflus at this point, I think you're set in your ways either way. I know I've talked to a few people that, uh, they decided that they don't want to fire Matt Eberflus just simply because of the continuity argument. And to that, I say just look at his record in one-score games and look at everything that's, there's plenty of statistics out there to kind of disprove the argument of wanting to keep Matt Eberflus. There was one in particular that I really wanted to look at, see if I can find it here real quick. I mentioned the 5-17 record earlier. There was another one that I kind of want to talk about real quick if I can find that. I'm not 100% sure what that is, but oh, here it
While
is.
you're
Okay.
looking for that, I'll kind of chime in.
Yeah.
For me, like I'm really thinking about this team, and like if I was a GM, it's like for left tackle, I understand. Like I do agree with you guys. I think Braxton Jones is a good tackle. I just don't think he's the kind of tackle that we should have for a young quarterback like Caleb Williams that we know is going to be our franchise quarterback. And also, it would be nice to pair him up with Darnell Wright because Wright would be heading into his third season. So it would, they'll be around relatively same experience. And how I would address it is like in free agency, I would try to sign however much money Trey Smith wants, give it to him, and he'll be our right guard. We already have Darnell Wright, it's fine. Center, we could address either draft, free agency. We'll see how that goes. And then, Tevin Jenkins, sad to say, but probably let him go. And then in the draft, I would say first round, if we have the opportunity, definitely take a left tackle. We have 2 second-round picks. We could use one of those second-round picks on offensive guard or defensive lineman. And then the second one, depends on what we do, and then just do the opposite. So if we draft the guard, get defensive lineman, and we draft the defensive lineman, get a guard. But I just think that it's so important to really shore up the offensive line. And I think if Poles is still the GM, he's not going to replace Braxton Jones like that because he's the one that drafted him, unfortunately. But if we were to fire Poles and hire someone else, I think they would look at that position and be like, it's time to upgrade. And if we have the opportunity, we will. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on the offensive line. And then you can get back to your stat.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that would be a good process and throw a bag at whoever you can get on this offensive line to improve. Uh, but what I was looking for was this stat per ESPN analytics. The Bears have lost 6 games where they have had an 80% win probability in the second half since 2022. Obviously, when Matt Eberflus became the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Now that is the Lions game in which the Bears were up 24-10 and lost that one 30-31. That is the Broncos game where they were up 28-7 and lost 31-28. The other Lions game where they were up 26-14 and lost 31-26. The Browns game, which they were up 10 points, 17-7 and lost that one 20-17. And then obviously the Washington and Packers game from this season. So to me, right there, that's plenty of proof. I'm over the whole, but he knows how to run a good defense because that's slowly not becoming the case this season. It seems like the unit just has a ton of weaknesses now, and it's slowly not becoming the case for Matt Eberflus. So to me, he doesn't really have another leg to stand on. I think that was his last thing, and it's slowly gone away. Joe, did you have something to mention?
Yeah. So I mentioned this in an article too. The people wanted to blame Fields for the losses last year, uh, the blown games. And sure, the offense wasn't good, and that definitely has a impact. Like in that Browns game, the offense couldn't do anything in like basically the whole game. Uh, although the Browns had a good defense, uh, in the Broncos game, the offense didn't do anything in the fourth quarter. I think Fields actually turned the ball over a couple times. So sure, you can blame it on the offense for turning the ball over, giving the ball away, whatever. But I agree with you. I think it's more of a coaching thing than a quarterback thing, especially because we saw our quarterback both times this year basically give us the win, and we still didn't win.
Yeah, and that's the case study there. There's nothing really left for Matt Eberflus to say, keep me moving forward because this is what I've done. And it's like a silver platter that he opens up and there's no food inside. This is that's what I have to show you from my time here with Chicago, and this is why you can win a Super Bowl with me. There's nothing for him. There's nothing for him to put his hat on at the end of the day and say, I'm the guy for the job. He's lost everything with that. But that's my opinion, and I think that's the large opinion right now moving forward for the Chicago Bears. So, do you guys have anything left you'd like to discuss before we head on out of here? All right. Well, with that being said, this has been the Bear Down Buzz podcast. As always, be sure to like our shorts, follow us on Twitter, read these guys' articles. They do great content as usual. So always pay attention to what they're putting out. Again, like our content, retweet, share, go like our YouTube shorts, everything having to do with the Bear Down Buzz podcast. We would greatly appreciate it. But with that being said, we're going to head on out of here. The Bears lose another heartbreaker to the Green Bay Packers by 20-19. They are 4-6 and face the Minnesota Vikings next week, which we will preview on Friday. But once again, this has been the Bear Down Buzz podcast, and we will see you next time.